Okay, welcome, Shavua Tov Morach. So, as we said last week, Baruch Hashem, Bezrat Hashem, we're going to try this week to learn the tunes of the Torah as much as we can. I'm not sure if today will be our last class of the series. Maybe we'll have one more, but basically, Baruch Hashem, till now, those that were following or those that want to follow, we Baruch Hashem recorded the other ones. This is officially our fifth class, or like I said, the first one's like introduction, so maybe you call it the fourth. But for those that are following, we Baruch Hashem went through a lot of the rules of how to pronounce the words, the letters, the vowels, different rules of the Shava and Dagesh, etc. Last week we went through a few. It could be last week we went through a lot in one class. Maybe we just a quick review. We talked about the Shava Nah, when sometimes the Shava, the two dots, one on top of the other, it moves. Like in the beginning of the word Bereshit, you move it a little, Shema, or other times you move it a little, it's called the Shava Nah, it moves. Sometimes it's completely silent, Shava Nah. Like we said, Beshiv Techa, the first Shava stops, Beshiv stops, and the Bet. The second one moves a little, Techa, Beshiv Techa. We talked about Dagesh, the letter inside, there's a dot inside the letter, Dagesh, sometimes it's there to make the letters stronger, to pronounce it more, to stretch it out a little, like Honenu, etc. And sometimes it's called Dagesh Kal, that it's just one of the 6 letters that sometimes it just tells you to say like Bet instead of Vet. We talked about sometimes the letter before Hashem's name makes the Aleph silent, depending on which letters comes before Hashem's name. So we said that the letters Vik Halev, Vav Kaf Lamed Bet, before Hashem's name, it swallows the Aleph. There's no patach under the Aleph. So Vado, Kado, I'm not saying Hashem's name fully, I'm just saying that's how you pronounce it. Bado, that means you don't say Ba'ado or Ka'ad. The Aleph is silent. It's swallowed up. So if there's a Kaf or Bet or Vav or Lam before Hashem's name, the patach under the Aleph is not pronounced. So I gave some examples. Gadelu, I can say the whole pasuk. Gadelu ladonai iti. It's half a pasuk. So I don't say la ado. I don't say the under the pasuk under the aleph. I say lado. So those 4 letters, vav, kaf, lamed, bet, we say it's silent. But the letters mem, shin, hey. If you have a mem, shin, or hey under the before the Hashem's name, there the aleph is pronounced. And it's funny because usually that it's just practically because the mem, shin, hey usually it's a tzere under the mem, shin, or hey. So therefore you go like me ado, or like ashrei ha'am shekachalo ashrei ha'am she Adonai Elohav. It's a she. So when it's a tzere or segol, then you say the patach under the aleph. Okay, that was and the same thing we said happens to Elokim. Those letters before Elokim depends. So it's Vikalev. Those letters Vikalev, the aleph is silent. I think that was the main things we discussed, right? So then we started learning the ta'amim. So this is one of the things a lot of people want to learn. That, like we said, that there's ta'amim. Ta'amim are tunes. Why are there tunes? There's many reasons. We discussed a little what's the point of the tunes. So you could say, many people will assume, it makes the reading of the Torah sound much nicer. Imagine just reading it without a tune. Okay, it's good to hear the Torah and learn the Torah, but when there's a tune, it makes it more pleasant. So it's true, that is one of the purposes of the tunes. And in fact, the Gemara says that even when you learn Mishnah Gemara, it's good to learn with the tune. It helps you to, I guess, enjoy better, maybe to remember it better. So that's one of the purposes. But there we'll see, B'ez Hashem, that there's other purposes. We mentioned already some, like by the Mile'el Milera, when every word has an accent. So like we gave us Avraham, there's 3 syllables, Avraham. So we say every word has an accent. It's either on the last syllable or second to last. So most words on the last syllable, Avraham. It's not Avraham, it's not on the ra, it's on the hum, Avraham. So it's if it's on the last syllable, it's called Milera. If it's second to last syllable, it's called Mila'el. And so one of the purposes, as we already mentioned, is that the tunes will help us to know where the accent is. Based on where the tune is on the word, helps you to know where the accent is. And we'll see B'ez Hashem more. So again, last week at the end, last few minutes, we just went through them quickly. We'll go B'ez Hashem over them. And like we mentioned, people might think, well, why do I have to learn it? Isn't it only for a Baal Korah that wants to read in the Torah in the Tzibur? So the answer is no. We said that really every person should try to learn, because, like we said, the best is when you read Shema, to read it with the tune. When there's a mitzvah every week to read the parsha twice, and the Targum once, called Shnai Mikra, or those are Chok Lisot, for example, and it's a mitzvah to read with the tune, or any other part of the Torah. So every man, I guess maybe women could also learn it, but since usually the men are obligated to do like Shnai Mikra or Shema, so it's really a mitzvah for them. And of course, a woman has to be careful. If she wants to do the tune, she shouldn't be necessarily in front of other men. But so the point is, everyone really should learn. And as we're going to see, like I mentioned, people maybe when they're bar mitzvah, when they become bar mitzvah, they learn the tune and they just like as a very like a quick, just how it sounds. But as we'll see, there's a lot of rules, and it's much more like than just how it sounds. Okay, so let's start again. I think last time I said I'm going to maybe send also on the chat, so when they send out the video, a picture of the tunes, of the names, which I didn't, so hopefully maybe this time I will, but maximum, many of the Chumashim, in the beginning of the Chumash has it, the names of the tunes. Some of them, it's like, there's like an Ashkenazi version, like they have sometimes different names for them, but more or less they're very similar. But if you have like a Sephardi Chumash, like I'm saying like Ish Matzliach, or then they might have also with the Sephardi, or easily online. You just like type in names of the tunes according to Sephardim, tunes of the Torah, or in Hebrew Ta'amei Amikra Sephardim. You should easily find it. Okay, so let's go again from the beginning, and we'll use maybe like the Sidur or the Chumash as a reference. So like in case you don't have like the names. We always like to start with the Shema as a good reference. Okay, so usually the beginning starts always, the Zarka is the first of the, so we said Zarka is an S-looking shape on top of the word, usually at the end of the word. So if you want to see it in your Sidur on the Shema, go to the end of Shema, in the Pasuk, V'haya lachem lesitzit. So on top of the word lachem, you see that S. It's an S like on or an infinity sign. So we said the way it sounds is it kind of goes up and down, like slowly up, slowly down, and twirls a little. Like the most classic, basic way we said, like goes like 4 or 5 steps up, and like this, Zarka. You go up, you go down. But I said usually people like to twirl it a little, make it more like, I don't know, professional, like Zarka. So the point is you twirl a little, you go high, and you go down. Okay, that's Zarka. So in other words, whenever you see this infinity sign or S on top of the word, that's the tune you make. Now, very important, we said that the place that is where you see that sign, that's where you make the accent in general. But this is where it starts to be a little, I don't want to say complicated, but there are 4 of the signs, and Zarka is one of them. Zarka is one of the 4 signs that not always, or officially not necessarily where it is on the word is where you make the accent. In other words, Zarka, that sign is always going to be at the end of the word, regardless of the accent. Now you're going to say, well, then how do I know where the accent is? Meaning, in the old Chumash, for example, in the old Chumashim, that sign was always at the end of the word, regardless of the accent, and you have to know on your own where the accent is. I mean, sometimes the accent is not going to be the end of the word. The accent is in the second to last. If you want an example, if you have a Chumash, you go to Parshat Vayera, okay? If you go to the 3rd, 4th Aliyah, I'm just helping you to, okay? Basically, it's Perek Yutet, Parshat Vayera is Sefer Bamidbar, Sefer Bereshit, Parshat Vayera, Perek Yutet, Pasuk Dalet. It's in the 3rd Aliyah. So the beginning of the pasuk is Terem Yishkavu. So Terem has a Zarka. So in the old Chumashim, officially the Zarka was only at the end, and you have to know on your own that you don't. The accent it's not at the end. It's not terem. No, it's on the tet. It's a mileel. It's terem. So it's a mileel. You have to accent on the tet, not the resh. So you're gonna say, how do I know? So the answer is, originally you had to know on your own somehow or from your other rules. But the newer Chumashim, basically all the newer Chumashim that you have, Art Scroll, and all the Tikkun Korims, in order to help us to know where the accent is, so on a word like that, they'll put two zarkas. I'm saying this in order to help you understand why sometimes I see two zarkas on one word. What is it? The answer is that the one at the end is the one where it's supposed to be. That's where it has to be. That's the tradition where it goes. And then the one before it is telling you where to make the accent. So that's why if you look at that word terem, you're going to see two. The first one is to tell you that's the accent. That's where you stretch it out. So it's, like we said, it's terem. And it's not terem, right? It's on the tet. So I'm telling you that zarka is one of those that, because there's a tradition that goes at the end, sometimes you'll see a second one earlier to tell you that's where the accent is. Okay, that's zarka. That the name of the tune is called the zarka. Then shofar holech. Okay, so now important rule here, very important rule that maybe many Baalei Koreh don't know. That the ta'amim, the tunes, are split up into two sections, two groups, and within one of them, it's subsections. So they're split up into what's called mafsikim and mishartim. Mafsikim means pause. Mishartim literally means servants, serving. What does that mean? That means some of the tunes, and usually it's the ones that like you make a tune, you stretch out, is they're mafsikim, which means you have to pause after the word a little. So in other words, zarka is one of them. So you go zarka or terem, small pause, and then you move forward. In other words, so the job of many of these tunes is to tell you a small pause. Now, what's interesting, I said that within this group of pauses, there's subcat. Within this group there's a sub groups, and in other words, there are 4 levels of pauses. This is how complicated in a way it could get, that maybe most people don't know about all these laws. But technically, within the group of pauses, there are 4 levels of how long to pause after the word. So obviously, what's the longest pause you think out of all the tunes? Which one has the longest pause? No, actually, that's what everyone thinks, but it's not. Someone said the line right after the word. No, that's not actually the longest pause. That's actually a very short pause. The longest, where do you think logically, where you should pause the longest when you read Torah?
Between Aliyahs.
Between Aliyahs, but when in the middle of Aliyah, where? What do you think? Where's the longest pause? Where's the longest break? Between 2 pasukim, right? The end of a pasuk. The end of the pasuk obviously is supposed to be the longest pause. So in other words, the sof pasuk is the biggest mafsik. It's called the kesarim. They have terms for it. So kesar is the Caesar. That's the highest. So in fact, there's 2 in that group. There's sof pasuk, and there's the atnach. The atnach we're going to see is like a wishbone or an upside down Y under the word. It's like the highest pause in the middle of a pasuk. It like breaks the pasuk into 2. Okay, and that's usually where you pause. Atnah. So atnah and sof pasuk, obviously sof pasuk is a longer pause, are the 2 highest pauses called kesarim. Now again, I don't think people are usually memorize all of the 4 and each exactly which tam is in which, because the first is easier to remember. Kesarim, and meaning sof pasuk and atnach is easier, just 2. But the other ones are a little harder to remember. But my point is, at least this is that we'll see, that people think, okay, you say a tune and you read. They don't realize that sometimes you have to pause. Sometimes you're not supposed to pause, or sometimes the pause is shorter. So okay. So again, zarka is a pause, but it's if you want to just tell you, it's category 3 pause. So it's relatively to right. It's not as long of a pause after than others. Okay, so zarka, shofar holech segolta. Now, shofar holech, if you have it, it's a small L-looking shape under the word called a shofar holech, and that's an example of the other group, of the mishartim. Some of the ta'amim are telling you don't pause. Mishartim means serving, to tell you move on. It's very important. One of the whole purposes of the ta'amim is to help you understand the pasuk. Because if you know how to pause the right places and you don't pause on the right, so you'll be able to understand the pasuk. Because like in any sentence, even in English, you have like a comma to tell you, okay, pause here, because this is the end of a phrase. So the ta'amim help you to know where's the end of the phrase, or like sub phrases, and where is not. Because sometimes if you're going to pause in the wrong place, you can mess up the meaning. So this is why it's important to know where to pause, where to pause and where not to pause. What's the mafsikim, right? And what's the level of mafsikim, and what's the mishartim. So, anyways, so shofar holech usually has no tune. It's a small L under the word. So I mean, you have full of that. Let's say you want to use Shema under the word Shema. I'm just going to go to it. It's actually not this week's parsha. Next week's parsha, Parshat Vayethanan. I'm using a chumash. So if you go to Shema, look at under. I'm sorry, not in the word Shema. I'm sorry, not in the word Shema. Look at the word ve'ahavta, the second pasuk, ve'ahavta. So we mentioned that under the aleph, that little L next to the comments is called shofar holech. So my point is that there's no tune for that, and it's telling you don't pause. Obviously, in the middle of the word, you're not going to pause. So that's right? Okay, so shofar holech. Then segolta. Segolta is 3 dots on top of the word, like the, right? 3 dots. And it always comes after a zarka. So go to Shema, the end of Shema. V'haya lachem lesisit. So on the lachem is a zarka. So zarka, segolta, lesisit. So segolta is the 3 dots on top of the word. And that always comes after zarka. And that's a bigger pause than the zarka. Segolta is always the end of a phrase. So that's actually pause number 2, level 2. It's called melachim, kings. There's a bunch of ta'amim in the second level. Okay, so zarka, shofar holech, segolta, pause. Some people make a longer tune on segolta. Segolta, but it's technically just enough just to pause segolta, maybe just a little high, just okay. Segolta. Now, continuing in the ta'amim, pazer gadol. This is one of the less frequent ta'amim in the Torah. It's like a number 4, but like a inverted 4 on top of the word. So it's not in the Shema. I guess an upside down H or whatever, or a 4 on top of the word. And we said it goes in levels high, and it goes high, right? But it goes in levels. Pazer gadol goes in levels. And when it comes to music and tunes, it's not like an exact length, meaning a person can make it shorter, longer. There's like the basic tune, and then it's like everyone has liberty if he wants to, depending on the crowd. And Chazanim like to sometimes make it like longer. And of course, this is what's called Yerushalmi version. There's other minhagim. There's Moroccan have their way they do it, their tunes. Ashkenazim have theirs, Temanim have theirs, I think Irakim have theirs. There's a number of minhagim. This is the one that's usually used by most Sephardim. The Iraqi maybe more, or the Syrians, usually the Persians, Yerushalmi. Okay, so that again, Pazer Gadol, you have to find it. If you want to just show you an example, maybe in this week's Parsha, okay? Those that are, this week's Parsha is Devarim. So, you have to look, and I'll go find it. Oh, it's actually in the first aliyah. The first pasuk. First pasuk of Parsha Devarim, Sefer Devarim, is in the word Bamidbar. In the word Bamidbar, it's a Pazer Gadol, so it goes Bamidbar. So you keep going higher and higher, okay? Then the next one is Talsha. Now this, we have to spend maybe a couple minutes on, because this is very confusing for people. there's two that look very similar. We mentioned this quickly last time. It's called talsha, and some call the other one tilsha, or the other one is tarsa. But to explain to you, it's a circle with a line. It looks like a magnifying glass on top of the word. But you'll notice sometimes the circle is all the way on the right of the word, and the line is pointing to the left. That's what he calls here a talsha. And then there's one where the circle's all the way on the left of the word, on the top of the left, and then the line is pointing to the right. And that they here calls it tarsa. There's different names for them. Okay, but the point is that the difference is one is on the right of the word, one is on the left of the word. Now, for example, going back to the first pasuk of this week's Parsha Devarim, the word after Bamidbar is ba'arava. There, the circle's on the left of the word. Now, what's the difference? So this is very important. Many, I think, don't know this rule. The question, first of all, is the tune different or not? So I think many do the tune the same, that they start high and they go low. So talsha, for sure, when the circle is on the right of the word, the way that it's done is talsha, where you start high and you go down slowly. Talsha. That's like, but not everyone maybe does it takes that long, but that's the official way it's done. That's when the circle's on the right of the word, called it talsha, and that is a mafsik. See, it's interesting. That one you pause a little after the word, but the one where the circle's on the left. So even though some make it the same tune, but that's officially a misharet. This is very interesting. When the circle's on the left of the word, at the end of the word, you're not supposed to pause after that word. You have to quickly, after that word, go to the next word. In other words, because usually that word that it's on it's not the end of a phrase. So don't stop. Many people stop because they make the tune. They think they don't realize there's a difference. This is a very important thing that many people don't know. That when the circle's on the left of the word, the tarsa. So it's a misharet, and the point is that you're not supposed to pause after that word. We'll give them examples. So in the first pasuk of this week's parsha, it's if you do that tune, it's ba'arava mol suf. That means don't pause. Right away after that, go to the next word. Now, it seems perhaps that the official minhag or original way of saying the tarsa when the circle's on the left is not like I did tarsa, but rather it's to do like a half pazer gadol. In other words, the tarsa, they go like tarsa instead of like pazer gadol, tarsa, pazer gadol. Tarsa is like a much quicker, shorter version, tarsa, and then continue to go. That's what I've heard, like maybe the more official, professional Baalei Koreh, they differentiate between the talsha and the tarsa. So in other words, when the circle is on the right of the word, on the beginning of the word, they do talsha, you start high and go down, but when it's on the left, all the way at the end of the word, then they do tarsa, then they go tarsa, and then like usually followed by azla gerish. Okay, but whether you do it, whichever way the tune you do it, it's important though to realize, like we said, that the talsha, when it's on the beginning of the word, it's a mafsik. That means you pause a little after the word. So you go talsha. So after that you pause a little, and then you continue. But when tarsa, it's at the end of the word, then you don't pause. Right afterward, you continue right away to the next word. Now, these two, talsha and tarsa, or talsha and tilsha, these are two of the four ta'amim that don't necessarily appear where the accent is. Remember, I said there are four ta'amim that the tradition is that they always go, regardless of where the accent is, they're always at one part of the word. Now, we said zarka was one of them. That zarka is always at the end of the word, even if the accent is earlier, and therefore the newer chumashim add one earlier. Then I forgot to mention segolta, the three dots on top of the word, which is always after zarka. That's another one of the four, the segolta always comes at the end of the word, regardless of where the accent is. So if the accent is earlier, they're going to add another segolta. That's why sometimes you'll see two segoltas, because the one at the end is where it's always has to be regardless. The one earlier is where the accent is. So going back to that pasuk I said in Parshat Vayera, which is pasuk Perik Yutet, pasuk Daled, in this third aliyah. So it says we said terem yishkavu. So the terem we said is a zarka, and there's two to tell you that the accent is on the tet. And the next word after terem is yishkavu. There it's a segolta. So there's two segoltas. Why two? Because the one at the end is there because it always has to be at the end of the word regardless. That's the Misorah. But since the accent is not the end, it's one before the end, it's on the kaf, it's a mila'el, so they added another, the newer chumashim add one there by the kaf to tell you that the accent is by the kaf. So it's not yishkavu, it's yishkavu. The accent is on the kaf, on the kamats, by the kaf, yishkavu. So terem, yishkavu. Okay, so segolta is one of the four that doesn't always necessarily go where the accent is. The other two is the talsha and the tilsha, or the talsha and the tarsa. Now here, the tarsa, where the circle is at the end of the word. I know this might sound very complicated, but it's good to learn it, and maybe little by little. When the circle is at the end of the word, which is the tarsa or the tilsha, so there, like it's similar to the zarkan segolta that the Misorah is, the tradition is that it always goes at the end of the word, regardless of the accent. So therefore, if it's a tarsa, if the circle is at the end, but the accent is not at the end of the word, so the newer chumashim, which is all basically the present day chumashim, they'll add another tarsa where the accent is. So that sometimes you'll see two tarsas. So one is at the end of the word. Again, it's where the circle is at the end and the line is pointing to the right. And then they'll add another one where the accent is. Okay? But the talsha, which is where the circle is on the right of the word and the line is pointing to the left, that's the exact opposite. That's the only one that it always comes at the beginning of the word, regardless of the accent. And since a lot of times the accent is not at the beginning of the word. So again, the newer chumashim, they will add another talsha to tell you where the accent is. Okay, so the talsha is the only one where it always officially goes in the beginning of the word, and the newer chumashim will add one to tell you where the accent is. So if you want to just show you some examples from the chumash, what? Oh, kachol, right. All right, okay, so that, exactly. This week's Parsha, in Parsha Devarim. So if you go to the third pasuk Gimel, the word kachol. So there, you see two on the word kachol. Why? Because this is a talsha. So that's why one of them is one of them the first one is there because that's where it has to go. Like we said, the Misorah is that it always has to come in the beginning of the word. But since the accent is on the chol, at the end of the word, so they added one. If you your chumash might have added one at this, to tell you that the accent is at the end. So the way it's pronounced is kechol. You start higher and you go, but the accent on the chol. Kechol. Okay? Someone is keep calling. I don't know if you want to. Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's an example. Okay, so that's a talsha. So again, and this is a mafsik, you pause a little. So it goes kechol, pause, and then you continue. Okay, fine. Next one is azla girish. So we talked azla girish is that one. It's one line. I guess I'm seeing that this, obviously we're probably not going to go through everything in one class, so I guess we'll continue this in next class also. But azla girish, so it's usually two words or three words, but sometimes it's on the same word. You have one line going up forward, and one line, and the next, and that's the azla, and the girish is one line going up, going like back. It's almost like a two together, Azla Gerish. So you have many of those in the Torah. So for example, the first pasuk in this Parsha Devarim, Mol Suf. So it goes as the first one you go high a little, the second one you kind of come down. Azla Gerish. So when you go Azla Gerish. Now the Azla is actually not a pause. This is another important rule. You shouldn't go Azla Gerish. You don't pause. You go right into the Gerish. The Azla Gerish should be connected. Azla Gerish. So the way you go like this, the Mol in the first pasuk, Mol Suf. Don't pause after Mol. Mol Suf. The Suf, the Gerish you pause. The Gerish is a pause. Is one of the pauses, a mafsik. I think it's level 3 pause. Or actually level 4. But anyways, so that's a small pause. Azla Gerish, small pause. Mol Suf. There's many of those in the Torah. Okay? Then the next one is Pasek. Pasek is a line after the word, the vertical line. And that's one of the ones that everyone knows because it looks like the biggest pause. It's actually one of the shortest pauses. It is a pause, but it's a short pause. Pasek, a quick pause. Pasek. You have many of those in the Torah as well. Like in the Pasuk Zain in this week's Parsha. First, Penu, the first word, Penu. Okay, Pasek. Revia. Revia is a diamond on top of the word. And some people stretch it out more or less. You go high a little. Some people stretch it out. Revia. But some people just do a shorter one. Revia. Okay, that's also a pause. Not a long pause after the word, but it's one of the mafsikim. So you have many of those, of course. In that same pasuk zayin, and usually right after a pasek you have a ravia. So pasek, ravia, penu, us'u lachem. Okay. Next, shofar mehupach. Shofar mehupach is actually one of those that people confuse. Shofar mehupach is that you have an arrow pointing forward at the end of the word, towards the end of the word. Shofar mehupach pashta. Again, that's very common. So, for example, in the first pasuk in Devarim, Ele hadevarim, that's a ravia. Ele hadevarim, asher diber Moshe. Under diber is a shofar mehupach. It's an arrow under diber. People like to go up a little, but remember, this is not a pause. This is very important because a lot of people pause there. You don't pause. You continue. So again, like this. Asher diber Moshe. You continue going. By Moshe, we're going to see the next one is a pashta. Now again, that's why maybe we're not going to do this all in one session because there's so much information. But the pashta, you see on top of the word Moshe, for example, in this week's parsha, the first pasuk, pashta is a line at the end of the word, the very end going forward. Pashta. Okay? So that, many people don't even know it's a tam. Many people don't stop there. Many people don't make a tune. And there's not really such a tune for the Yerushalmim, but it's a small pause. People don't even know there's a pause there. You have the small pause. So, Asher Diber Moshe, small pause. El Kol Yisrael, Shofar Mehupach, Pashta. It's called a Pashta. When it's at the very end of the word, it's a Pashta. Now, what's confusing is because there's another similar tam called a Kadma, which is when it's not at the end of the word. It's in the middle of the word. And there it's not a pause. So you see how careful you have to be, how much information there is that people are not aware of. Right? Like the Azla Gerish, the Azla looks like a Pashta. It's the same shape. Just the Azla or Kadma is where it's not at the end of the word. And the Pashta is at the end. When I say end, it's at literally the end at the top of the word, but at the end of the last letter of the word. So there you pause a little. Pashta. Shofar meupach, pashta. This is where, you have to be careful. Terekadmin is two of those lines, like the two of the pashtas. So there, the difference between a pashta and terekadmin is, first of all, terekadmin usually goes up a little higher. It goes terekadmin. So you have many of those in the Torah, like in the Shema. B'shivtecha bevetecha. So if you look top of the word bevetecha, there's two lines. So there, it's basically, when you have those two lines, terekadmin, you make the accent on the first of the two lines. And we mentioned that usually when you have two ta'amim on a word, like the word of ahavtan shema, you have two ta'amim. Under the aleph, you have one ta'am called the shofar holech, and you have we're going to get to zakef katan on the ta. Usually when you have two, the accent is on the second. By the Terek Hadmin, the reason why the accent is on the first line is because that's not two ta'amim. That's one tam. It's one tam called Terek Hadmin. So there the accent on the first one. So Terek Hadmin, like B'shivtecha bevetecha, you go up a little. And that's also a small pause. Zakef Katon. Zakef Katon is one of the most common ta'amim. Usually some psukim have maybe 2-3 of them, where it's two dots on top of a word, one on top of the other. And that's like also a small tune. Zakef Katon. So, right? So like, for example, in the Shema, B'shivtecha bevetecha, that's Tereka, I mean, Uvlechtecha vaderech. On top of vaderech is two dots called a Zakef Katon. You go up a little. Some people like to stretch it out more or less. Uvlechtecha vaderech, Zakef Katon. Also, that's a pause. That's actually one of the bigger pauses. It's usually at the end of a phrase. Zakef Gadol. That's when you have two dots next to a vertical line on top of the word. Two dots, one on top of the other, and next to a line, vertical line. You go high a little, higher. Zakef Gadol. You don't stretch it out too much. Some people do a little differently. The Yerushalmim, Zakef Gadol. The point is, you go high a little, and it's the same level of pause as Zakef Katon. So you do pause after that word. Okay. If you want to have examples, like in this week's parsha, Zakef Gadol. Zakef Katon is everywhere, like the first pasuk. Asher diber Moshe el kol Yisrael. On top of Israel is a Zakef Katon. Zakef Gadol, you have to find it, but like we said, it's two dots next to a vertical line on top of the word. Like the word vanavo in pasuk Yutet of Parshat Devarim. The Perek Aleph pasuk Yutet at the end, vanavo. Okay, again, some usually don't stretch it out too much. Vanavo. But again, remember, this is a mafsik. You have to pause after that word a little. It's actually level 2. Zakef Katon is the second highest pause in that category Melachim. Okay, we're almost done with the main ta'amim, so don't get too ambitious. I guess next time we'll go more over it. Okay. Then you have Shnei Gerishin. This is also common. Two lines going up and towards the back. Like the common one is in this Shema by the word Daber in the third paragraph. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe lemor Daber. So Daber has Shnei Gerishin. Usually they stretch it out kind of a little, like people sometimes stretch it out a lot. But it basically goes high. Daber Shnei Gerishin. Some people, some chazanim, they like stretching this out a lot, but technically that you just go up, you go high. Actually, finish the about. I'll start another one maybe quickly, although we're almost done. But sorry. Anyways. So that one goes high. Shnei Gerishin. Like I said, when it comes to ta'amim, so there is a little of a leeway. There is a little of a leeway that, like how long to stretch it out. Okay, so that was Shnei Gerishin, and that is a mafsik. You pause a little after, not too much. This is, I think, level 3 or 4 pause. When I say levels, that means the higher the level, like 1 is the highest pause, like it's Sof Pasuk. Okay, this is one of the less, because basically you could figure out by context. Usually the Shnei Gerishin is on like the beginning of a phrase, like Daber. So speak, but obviously that's not you have speak. You have to continue, right? But it's a small pause. Okay, next Yetiv. Yetiv looks the same as a shofar mehupach. It's an arrow under the word. This is also many don't maybe know the difference. Yetiv is where the arrow is at the beginning of the word, before the word starts even. On the bottom of the word, before the word starts, it's an arrow called the Yetiv. There it's a small pause, and like they usually emphasize a little, go up, like Yetiv. Like they like to like puzzle and make it like a middle emphasis. So like this week's Parsha, Devarim, like the Pasuk Daled, the third word. So it goes, ahare hakoto. The word et is a yativ because you see it's at the beginning of the word. So you go et, you stop a little, et, you pause a little, so go et, yativ. Okay, that's a yativ. It's a small, yeah. And the next is darga tevir. That's a very common thing where darga is like a small s under the word. You go up a little, like, but yeah, and then tevir you go down. Darga tevir. That's also very common. Let's see an example. It's I think even in the first pasuk of the parsha of Devarim, at the end of the pasuk, ben paran uven tofel. So all these ta'amim that I'm mentioning, because besides for those four that I said are an exception, wherever the tune is, that's where you accent the word. So for example, paran, where it's under the resh, paran, not paran. Since it's under the resh, you accent on the resh. Paran, right? So most of the ta'amim, wherever the tam is, that's the accent. Uven tofel. Why did I go tof? Why did I not do uven tofel? Uven tofel. Because it's the tevir is under the tav, so that's where the accent is. Okay? So that goes down a little, and after the tevir, the second one, there's a pause. The darga, there's no pause. So you always have to read it quickly after that, don't pause. Darga, tevir. They usually go together, but after the darga, there's no pause. So make sure people sometimes pause after the darga, and sometimes it can mess, like, it can like kind of mess up the meaning. So you don't darga tevir again. Uven ben paran uven tofel. Sometimes there's a pasek after the darga, but then you go more quicker stop. But okay, that's yeah. And then basically the last few. Today ta'ameh is very rare, more rare. We have two lines under the word going forward. It's very. I actually had at the end of the Parshat Matot. There's very few in the Torah. Right, end of the Parshat Matot, which is we read it yesterday. The first of the two we read yesterday. The last pasuk of Matot, the word la. It has those two lines, but there's different menhagim how to do it. But it's not a pause. Some people do stretch it out la, like a double tevir, but you don't pause after. You continue to the next word, and then you have ma'arich. The last couple that are ma'arich tarha is very common. It's always telling you to slow down till either an atnach or the end of the pasuk. Ma'arich tarha is under the word. Ma'arich is the line going down forward. Tarha is the line going down, going back. So usually it's together. Ma'arich tarha, and then after it's either atnah or ma'arich tarha, sof pasuk. It's telling you to slow down. Ma'arich, you don't stop. Tarha, you stop a little. Okay, I said almost every pasuk has it. Usually, for sure, at the end of the first pasuk of this week's parsha, the end of the pasuk of Devarim, velavan v'hatzerot. That's ma'arich tarha, and after that, the sof pasuk. But you usually have a tarha before a atnah as well, and before a sof pasuk. So atnah, we kind of mentioned, is the wishbone under the word. That's one of the biggest pauses. Like in the first pasuk of Devarim, it's the word hayarden. Hayarden, it's a small pause. Be'ever, hayarden, and again in the Shema you have all of them. Like the first pasuk, Shema Yisrael. Under Shema is a tarha. Sometimes it's a tarha without a marich. Shema Yisrael. So Shema you pause a little, marich. Tarha, and Israel is an atna, you pause more. Shema Yisrael, or the next pasuk. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. So under et is a tarha, and Elokecha is an atna, you pause more. Et Hashem Elokecha. And then of course you have marich tarha, sof pasuk. The end of the pasuk is where you pause the most. And it's interesting that the official sign in the sof pasuk is not the two dots at the end of the pasuk. It's a small line under the last word, which tells you where you accent the word. So, like for example, b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha. That's ma'ich tarha. U'b'chol me'odecha. That's the sof pasuk, and there's a line by the dalet tell you that's your accent. U'b'chol me'odecha, not me'odecha. No, u'b'chol me'odecha, because it's called the gaya. There's a couple words for that line under that line by the dalet there. It's that tells you where to make the accent or meteg. Anyway, so these are the main. There's a few more. Maybe we'll mention more. Like there's a shalshelet, very rare. That it's like a zigzag on top of the word. It's like only 4 of those. The Sephardim is not so long for the Sephardim. It's like a quicker shalshelet. That's how they do it. Shalshelet, and then you pause. And then you have one karnei farah, which is only one time in the whole Torah. Last week's parsha, I think Mas'eh, where it's like a longer pazer gadol. It's like two. It looks like two horns, like a talshan and tilshan, the same word. Right? So it looks like the horns of a cow. That's karnei farah. Again, it's only one time in the whole Torah, by the words alpaim ba'ama in parshat Mas'eh. Okay, so I apologize if that took maybe longer than I expected, but you see how much information, and we just did a little. There are in the Ta'amim. Hopefully, maybe next time we'll go more into review and more examples. B'ez Hashem, hopefully again to maybe I guess some laws also of Kriyat Torah. B'ez Hashem and Tefillah. Okay, B'ez Hashem, we should be zoche to read the Torah properly. Amen. Ken Yiratzon. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen. Ve'amen. Shavua tov Baruch. Do you mind? No, it's okay. Thank you. My pleasure. Mesorot tovot. Chodesh tov Baruch.